When the emergency sirens howled through the crystalline corridors of Verelia Prime, everyone understood that something had gone terribly wrong. Sirens were not meant for palace use. They were relics of an older, bloodier age, before treaties, before ceremonial wars, before the Queen had remade the galaxy through diplomacy instead of conquest. Now, their sound echoed like a scream trapped inside glass. Dr. Elias Rourke paused mid-step, his tool case dangling from one hand as the floor beneath him vibrated. Servitors rushed past, their bioluminescent crests flickering erratically. He caught fragments of shouted phrases in half a dozen alien tongues. Attack. Council chamber. Queen injured. Elias felt his stomach drop. He was human, one of the few allowed permanent residents within the royal complex, and his role was a strange one. Not a soldier. Not a diplomat. He was a specialist in ancient Terran biorepair techniques, brought here because the Verelians believed humans possessed an unsettling talent, fixing things that should not be fixable. Elias broke into a run. The council chamber was a ruin. Crystal pillars lay shattered like fallen ice giants. The air shimmered with the fading residue of energy weapons. Guards lay motionless, their armor split open, violet blood staining the floor in branching patterns. At the chamber center, surrounded by a ring of trembling officials, lay Queen Sereth Valon.
She was still alive. Barely.
Her long, iridescent form was twisted unnaturally, her breathing shallow and uneven. And where her right hand should have been an elegant, many-fingered limb used to command fleets and seal treaties, there was only a cauterized stump, still faintly smoking. Elias swallowed hard. "Move," he said, his voice sharper than he felt. "All of you move back." The Verelians hesitated. No one ordered the Queen's counsel. But then Sereth's remaining hand twitched weakly, and one of her eyes, opaline and unfocused, shifted toward Elias. "Human," she rasped, her voice a whisper carried through a translator field. "You came." "I'm here," Elias said, kneeling beside her. "Just stay with me." A senior advisor stepped forward, panic barely contained. "Dr. Rourke, her life signs are destabilizing. Our medics aren't trained for this kind of trauma," Elias finished. "I know. That's why you called me." He opened his case. The attack had been swift and surgical. A dissident faction, furious over the Queen's latest peace accords, had smuggled an assassin into the council chamber. The blade used to sever her hand was monomolecular, designed to cut through energy shields and bone alike. By the time the guards reacted, the damage was done. Verelian medicine was advanced, but it was optimized for their biology under controlled conditions. Massive trauma confused their auto-regenerative systems. The Queen's body was attempting to heal itself in dozens of conflicting ways, each one draining her strength. Elias worked quickly, attaching sensor filaments and injecting stabilizers synthesized for cross-species compatibility. "She's losing coherence," one medic said, his voice shaking. "Her neural lattice." "I see it," Elias muttered. "Keep her core temperature steady. And no energy pulses. If you trigger her regeneration reflex now, she'll burn herself out." The medic stared at him. "You speak as if you've treated our kind before." "I've treated worse odds," Elias replied. He didn't add that most of those odds had been human. As the Queen was transferred to the inner medical sanctum, Elias felt the weight of the moment settle on him. This wasn't just a patient. Sereth Valon was the linchpin of interstellar stability. Her death would fracture alliances, ignite old wars, and likely doom entire systems. And now, her survival depended on a human with tools that many considered archaic. Inside the sanctum, the doors sealed with a resonant hum. The room adjusted itself automatically, reshaping gravity, light, and atmosphere to suit both doctor and patient. Elias rolled his shoulders, steadying his breathing. "Elias," Sareth whispered faintly. "Do not fail." He met her gaze. "I won't." But the truth was more complicated. Saving her life was one thing. Saving her hand, her symbol of authority, her connection to Varelian tradition, was something else entirely. Varelians believed the hand carried memory. Their neural pathways extended deep into their limbs, especially the dominant one. Losing it was not merely physical mutilation, it was cultural death. A queen without her hand could rule, but she would never truly be whole. The severed hand had been recovered, preserved in a stasis field. Varelian medics had already declared reattachment impossible. The neural decay had begun too quickly. Their systems couldn't reconcile the interruption. Elias stared at the stasis chamber, jaw clenched. Human medicine once faced similar limits. Once, losing a limb meant losing it forever. But desperation had driven innovation. Elias had trained in experimental neural reweaving, techniques abandoned by most of humanity as too risky, too complex, too unpredictable. He had never tried it on an alien queen. "Doctor," an advisor said quietly, "if you cannot restore her hand, we will accept." "I didn't say I can't," Elias cut in. They stared at him. "I said it won't be easy." The procedure took hours. Elias began by suppressing the queen's regenerative reflex entirely, a dangerous move. Without it, even minor stress could prove fatal. But with it active, her body would reject any foreign intervention. Working with microscopic precision, he aligned the severed hand, not physically, but neurologically. Human techniques focused on rebuilding neural pathways first, forcing the body to follow the brain's instructions rather than the other way around. Sweat dripped down his temples as he worked, hands steady despite the pressure. "Neural bridge at 20%, he murmured. Come on, the queen's vital signs spiked suddenly. Her body convulsed, energy rippling across her skin like liquid light. "She's destabilizing," a medic cried. "I know," Elias snapped. "Hold her steady now." He injected a human-designed regulator, one that forced the nervous system into synchronization. For a terrifying moment, everything went silent. No readings. No signals. Then a pulse. Weak, but real. Elias exhaled shakily. As the neural bridge strengthened, something unexpected happened. The queen's consciousness brushed against his. Not physically, but emotionally. Varelians were subtly empathic. Normally, the barrier between species prevented cross-sensory exchange. But Elias's technique bypassed those safeguards, linking raw neural data. He felt her pain, her fear, her rage, and beneath it all, resolve. "You risk much, human," her presence echoed faintly.
"Why?"
Elias swallowed. His voice trembled despite himself. "Because you matter."
"To your people."
"To the galaxy." "And to you?" The question caught him off guard. "I believe in what you're building," he said after a moment. "That's enough." There was a sense of quiet acknowledgement. Then her consciousness receded, leaving Elias shaking. He had crossed a line no human ever had before. The final stage was the most dangerous. Elias reactivated the queen's regenerative reflex while maintaining the neural bridge, a balancing act that required constant adjustment. Too much regeneration, and the body would reject the hand. Too little, and the tissues would necrotize. Minutes stretched into an eternity. "Regeneration stabilizing," a medic whispered in disbelief. Color slowly returned to the queen's severed limb. Energy veins lit up, responding to neural signals that should not have been possible. Elias laughed softly, a sound halfway to a sob. That's it, you're doing it." The queen's fingers twitched. Once.
Twice.
Then her hand closed weakly around his wrist. The room went completely still. She's reconnected. Someone breathed. Elias slumped back in his chair, exhausted beyond words. Yeah, he said hoarsely. She is. Queen Sereth slept for 2 full cycles. During that time, the palace existed in a state of suspended breath. Fleets stood ready. Diplomats waited. Enemies watched. When she finally woke, Elias was there. Her eyes focused slowly, awareness returning piece by piece. She lifted her right hand, and flexed it carefully. Light shimmered along its surface, the neural glow perfectly synchronized with the rest of her body. It is whole, she said softly. Elias smiled faintly. You'll need rehabilitation. The connection is strong, but unfamiliar, like learning a new language. She turned her gaze to him. You gave me more than my hand, human. He frowned. I just did my job. No, she said gently. You chose to defy certainty, to risk failure. That is not merely duty. She studied him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. What do you intend to do now? She asked. Honestly? Elias shrugged tiredly. Sleep for a week. A soft, melodic sound escaped her. Varelian laughter. The political shockwaves were immediate. News of the Queen's survival spread across the galaxy within hours. The dissident faction lost all leverage. Worlds that had hesitated reaffirmed their alliances. The image of Sereth raising her restored hand before the council became a symbol of resilience and of something else. Human ingenuity. Elias found himself summoned not to laboratories, but to diplomatic halls. Ambassadors studied him with newfound respect, some with suspicion. One evening, he was called privately to the Queen's solar balcony. Virelia Prime glowed beneath them, a tapestry of light and motion. You changed the balance, Sereth said, standing beside him. Not just by saving me, but by showing what cooperation can achieve. Elias looked out at the stars. That was always your message. She inclined her head. And now it is embodied by you. He chuckled awkwardly. No pressure, right? Her eyes softened. I would ask something of you, Elias Rourke. Name it. Stay, she said simply. Not as a tool. Not as an emergency solution, but as my chief medical architect. Help us build systems that do not fail when certainty breaks. Elias considered the weight of the offer. Then he nodded. I'd be honored. Years later, historians would argue about that moment. Some would say the Queen's survival marked the true beginning of galactic unity. Others would claim it was the first step toward human influence surpassing its boundaries. But those who were there remembered something simpler. A queen, broken and bleeding, placing her hope in a human's steady hands. And a human, standing at the edge of impossibility, choosing to believe that some things, no matter how severed, could be made whole again. The galaxy would never forget the day the Queen's hand was severed, nor the human whose skills became her only hope and proved that hope was enough. On the anniversary of the attack, the grand concourse of Virelia Prime fell silent. Thousands gathered, envoys, soldiers, scholars, and citizens from 100 worlds, watching as Queen Sereth stepped forward alone. No guards flanked her. No weapons shimmered at her side. Only light, starlight, and her presence. She raised her right hand, not in command, in acknowledgement. The restored limb glowed faintly, its neural patterns perfectly synchronized, alive with a harmony that had once been deemed impossible. The crowd felt it, an unspoken truth rippling through them. This was not merely a healed wound. It was a testament. Sereth's voice carried across the vast hall. Once, I was told that loss defines us, she said. that what is taken can never truly be returned. But I stand before you as proof that this belief is incomplete. Her gaze found Elias in the crowd. A human reminded me that survival is not about restoring the past exactly as it was, but about daring to build something stronger in its place. The galaxy listened. From that day forward, Varelian medical doctrine changed. Human neural reweaving became the foundation of a new interspecies science. Wars were postponed, then avoided. Borders softened. Trust, slowly and painfully, took root. As for Elias Rourke, he never sought statues or songs. He worked quietly in sunlit laboratories, training teams from worlds that once would not have shared the same air. Sometimes, when exhaustion weighed heavy, the Queen would visit, not as a ruler, but as a reminder of what courage looked like when certainty failed. And when historians asked what truly saved the Queen that day, technology, skill, or chance, the answer was always the same: hope placed in steady hands. Because on the day the Queen's hand was severed, the galaxy learned something it would never forget. Even when power is cut away, even when the future bleeds out onto the floor, survival belongs to those brave enough to believe that what was broken can still become whole.